The ballroom at the Four Seasons in downtown Austin shimmered with soft golden light. It was the kind of evening where success had a scent, a mix of perfume, ambition, and champagne. Velvet suits, silk gowns, smiles so polished they could cut glass. But amidst that curated perfection, one man stood still, like a shadow refusing to be swallowed by the glitz. Ethan Walker. His name echoed through the hall as the host announced him, and the 2024 Visionary Tech Pioneer Award goes to... A pause. "Mr. Ethan Walker!" Applause thundered. People stood, cameras flashed, yet Ethan didn't move immediately. He adjusted his cufflinks slowly, deliberately, as if buying time before walking into a room filled with ghosts. He approached the stage, every step measured. When he reached the podium, he didn't flash a smile. He didn't bow. He simply stared into the audience, the lights catching in his eyes like flickers of something burning just beneath the surface. And then he spoke. "This award is not a celebration. It's a gravestone." A ripple moved through the room. Confusion, curiosity, discomfort. They say success is built on perseverance, talent, vision. But sometimes, it's built on the ashes of everything you once believed in. A pause. A longer silence. What I'm about to tell you will change how you see me. Maybe even how you see yourselves. Because I didn't get here by rising above. I got here because someone I trusted buried me. He glanced down, lips pressed tight. When he looked back up, his voice was steady. Too steady. My wife betrayed me. Not just in bed, in boardrooms, in bank accounts, in the blueprints of the very company we built together. Gasps, audible ones, even from the back. Rachel didn't just cheat. She orchestrated. She calculated. She smiled in my face while replacing the foundation of my future with lies. The screen behind him flickered to life, displaying a slideshow of headlines, smiling corporate portraits, patent filings, some with her name replacing his. "This isn't revenge," he continued, his voice dark silk. "This is a revelation. Because what happens when the person sleeping next to you every night is the same one poisoning your dreams?" He let that hang. The weight of betrayal pulled the air from the room. Rachel's absence was suddenly louder than anything else. Everyone noticed. "I was erased from my own narrative," he said. "Cut out. Replaced. Outmaneuvered. But she forgot one thing." He leaned forward, just slightly, the mic catching the edge of a deeper emotion. "You can steal a man's company. You can take his name off the door, but you can't rewrite the fire inside him." The screen changed again. Financial charts, signed NDAs, email snippets, just long enough to glimpse. "I built again, smarter, quietly, and now, here we are." He took a final breath, then delivered the blow. "So if you came tonight for a toast, I'm sorry. But if you came for truth, welcome to Karma Strikes." The logo appeared on screen. The tagline followed, "Where betrayal meets justice." Ethan turned his gaze to the lens broadcasting live. This is the story of how love became war, and how war forged something sharper than success. Stay with me, because the truth doesn't just set you free. It burns everything in its path. You thought this was just another success story, but behind every billion-dollar company is a truth that no press release can hide. Behind every smile, a secret. Behind every empire, a betrayal. In this episode of Karma Strikes, witness how trust became a weapon, and how a man rose not in spite of heartbreak, but because of it. If you believe truth deserves to be heard, if you've ever felt the sting of betrayal, hit like, subscribe, and share this story. Comment below. Have you ever been blindsided by someone you loved? Let's talk justice. Let's talk karma. Long before betrayal had a name, it wore a smile. And Rachel's smile was a thing of legend in Austin's startup circles. Warm, disarming, aspirational. Ethan fell into it the way people fall asleep. Slowly at first, then all at once. Their beginning was not grand or dramatic, just real. They met at a poorly lit networking event where the snacks were stale but the conversations oddly electric. She complimented his pitch deck. He laughed at her brutal takedown of blockchain buzzwords. They bonded over their mutual loathing of VCs who asked, "But what if Google does it first?" Within 6 months, Ethan and Rachel were living together. Within 9, Waveline was born in their apartment's living room, between pizza boxes and stacks of whiteboard sketches. Ethan handled back-end development and data architecture. Rachel handled everything else. She was the face, the voice, the closer. He was the brain behind the silence, and it worked. For a while. They grew fast, too fast. Success has a way of speeding past red flags. The first contract they signed gave Rachel final say on equity allocation. Ethan trusted her. Why wouldn't he? Every late night, every investor pitch, every server crash fixed with 4 hours of code and caffeine, they shared it all. Or so he thought. Rachel had always been ambitious, but somewhere along the way, that ambition stopped including Ethan. Her calendar was suddenly full of private consultations, her inbox a fortress. He told himself it was the price of growth. But growth shouldn't feel like being left behind. He remembered a Tuesday, rain-soaked, unremarkable. He came home early and found her on a video call, laughing in that polished, client-facing way. But when she saw him, her expression shuddered. She closed her laptop. "Just an investor," she said too quickly. "We were reviewing expansion strategy." But Ethan knew her cadence. That wasn't business laughter. That was performance. The shift was subtle, like erosion. Meals together became takeout eaten in separate rooms. Conversations grew functional. Even their arguments lacked heat, like two actors reciting from scripts they'd both forgotten how to believe. Then she proposed restructuring the board. "Just for efficiency," she explained. "We need agility to scale." But the new structure stripped Ethan of voting power. He hesitated. She kissed him, and Ethan signed. Because love makes optimists of us all. But love is also where betrayal hides best. One night, while debugging a critical latency issue, Ethan noticed a spike in API calls to a hidden endpoint. It was cleanly written, efficient. Someone had duplicated Waveline's core algorithms and set them to ping a secondary server, one registered to a shell company in Delaware. He traced access back to Rachel's work laptop. His chest tightened, not with shock, but recognition. This wasn't an accident. It was an exit plan. For weeks, he said nothing. But he started archiving everything, Git commits, IP logs, metadata trails. He even installed a packet sniffer on their router. If she was preparing to walk away, he would not let her vanish with his legacy. The worst betrayal is not when they lie. It's when they let you keep believing. And Ethan? Ethan had believed too long. The silence in their home became a language. It spoke in closed doors, silent phones, the hollow thud of keys dropped on the kitchen counter. Rachel still smiled in public. She still introduced him at conferences as our brilliant CTO. But when the cameras were off, she vanished behind a veil of meetings and deadlines. Ethan began keeping a journal, not of feelings, but of facts, evidence, patterns. A crime scene in progress, hidden behind 2 wedding rings and a shared Dropbox folder. And then came the tipping point. A message accidentally forwarded to his inbox. "Once we finalize the acquisition, make sure Ethan's exit package is airtight. We don't want him lingering." It was from Rachel, sent to their lead counsel. He stared at the screen. So that was it. She wasn't just leaving him, she was erasing him. But Ethan Walker was not a man who disappeared quietly. And this was only the beginning. In the weeks after that forwarded email, the one that made his blood freeze, Ethan became a shadow with a heartbeat. He walked the same halls he had once designed on paper napkins and sleepless ambition, but now, every wall whispered betrayal. The Waveline headquarters, once his cathedral of innovation, now felt like a sterile mausoleum. The glass conference rooms where he'd once mapped dreams now hosted strategy sessions he was excluded from. Rachel's smile still adorned the elevator screens. Her voice still echoed in boardroom recordings. But Ethan was the name they began scrubbing out of history, bit by bit, slide by slide. But shadows don't vanish. They observe. They remember. He began keeping hours that blurred into the surreal, arriving before the sun, leaving long after it had fled. And when he wasn't at Waveline, he was at Kelly Thompson's office in Chicago. She was the kind of attorney who didn't ask how deep the rabbit hole went. She simply started digging. "They sold your code like black market stock options," she told him, eyes never leaving the screen. "Rachel didn't just outmaneuver you, she commodified you." The words felt surgical. Ethan began building timelines on his apartment wall with colored string and time-stamped screenshots. What started as evidence became obsession. What was once doubt hardened into resolve. Late one night, while parsing old GitHub commits, he found a sequence buried beneath an obscure branch, a tiny, encrypted note in the code. It wasn't Rachel's work, and it wasn't his. It was Nathan's, his best man, his co-architect. And hidden inside that note, a digital breadcrumb trail, one that didn't just point to Rachel, but to a holding company registered in the Cayman Islands. And there, buried under shell entities, was Ethan's name, not as founder, but as liability. They were setting him up, not to vanish, but to take the fall. He confronted Nathan, not with rage, but with silence. That silence cracked Nathan faster than any scream. "She said you'd never see it coming," Nathan whispered, "that you were too good, too trusting." "She was right," Ethan replied. "Until now." From that moment, everything changed. He stopped playing defense. He began preparing for war. He and Kelly filed whistleblower claims with the SEC. A former intern gave him access to Waveline's internal Slack logs, months' worth of strategic betrayal disguised as corporate innovation. He uncovered a pitch deck Rachel sent to VC firms, where Ethan's photo had been replaced, his contributions rewritten. The worst part? Investors ate it up. "She's the visionary," they said. "He was always just the coder." The betrayal wasn't just from her. It was systemic. The world had already chosen sides, but Ethan wasn't there to win public opinion. He was there to deliver reckoning. He started leaking, quietly, strategically. Select journalists received encrypted packets, proof of stolen IP, timelines of forged documents, internal discussions suggesting stock manipulation. He never signed his name. Just one word: karma. And the storm began to gather. News outlets started sniffing. 1, then 2, then 6. Rachel held press conferences. She called it a smear campaign. But behind her composure, Ethan saw it. The tightening jaw, the flicker in her eye when asked about co-founder roles. December 12th was approaching like a loaded gun. And then came the phone call. It wasn't from Rachel. It was from her sister. "Ethan, I thought you should know. Rachel met with federal agents this morning. She's trying to frame this as your financial misconduct." Silence. Then a slow inhale. "Thank you," Ethan said, "for being the first in her family to speak the truth." And as he hung up, something inside him settled. Not with peace, but with clarity. This wasn't about revenge. This was about resurrection. He looked at the mirror and whispered to himself, like a vow. "You tried to bury me, but I'm not soil. I'm fire. If you were in Ethan's shoes, how far would you go to take back what was yours? Comment below. Because justice isn't always clean. But karma? Karma doesn't forget. And it never shows mercy. The day after Rachel's meeting with the feds, Ethan did something he hadn't done in months. He smiled. Not because he was winning, not yet, but because the final card had been played. And now, it was his turn to flip the table. The war room, once a messy web of screenshots and evidence, was now a machine of precision. Kelly brought in forensic accountants. Ethan brought in ex-employees. They didn't meet in cafes. They met in code vaults, hotel basements, and encrypted Zoom calls at 2:47 a.m. Each session was a silent rehearsal for Judgment Day. Kelly whispered to him during one of those late-night sessions, "This isn't a case anymore, Ethan. This is a revolution. And revolutions require strategy." So Ethan didn't just gather evidence. He started setting traps. He purchased a burner laptop, installed keyloggers on a terminal Rachel used in her office, bought signal jammers off the dark web to block alerts when he accessed Waveline's hidden S3 data buckets. He rented an Airbnb across from Waveline's HQ under a false name, installed a telephoto lens, and recorded every visitor to the C-suite. Rachel had made one mistake. She thought Ethan was still the man she left behind. But Ethan had become something else, something colder, sharper, immovable. He created a second layer to the rebellion, codenamed Ghost Line, a parallel network of trusted insiders, disillusioned board members, and sympathetic journalists. They shared information in fragments, each unaware of the full picture, but all unknowingly contributing to Ethan's blueprint of exposure. One by one, the cracks in Rachel's empire widened. A former assistant anonymously forwarded a recording of Rachel admitting to backdating contracts. A janitor emailed Ethan a photo of shredded documents referencing Cayman bank wires. A data engineer leaked a server access log proving Rachel's illegal code deployment pre-merger. And then came the smoking gun, a Slack screenshot of Rachel telling legal counsel, "Push Ethan's name off everything before Q4. He's dead weight now." Ethan smiled again. But it wasn't joy. It was the calm before a storm. He began feeding journalists deeper cuts, whistleblower testimony, doctored investor decks, and emails between Rachel and Nathan mapping out a timeline for Ethan's graceful exit. Articles exploded online. Startup starlet or corporate saboteur? Billion-dollar betrayal, the Waveline scandal. Investors started pulling out. Shareholders demanded emergency meetings. The valuation tanked. But Ethan wasn't finished. He met with a documentary filmmaker. "If I burn, I want the whole world to see the fire," he said, placing a hard drive on the table. And just like that, the cameras rolled. He told his story, not as victim, but as architect of the comeback. He didn't hide the tears, the betrayal, the nights he slept on office couches, the moment he found Nathan's code, the breath that caught when Rachel smiled like she hadn't dismantled his life cell by cell. America listened. His story went viral. Threads dissected his journey. Redditors exposed Rachel's secret shell core. TikTokers reenacted his mirror vow, "I'm not soil, I'm fire." Rachel fought back. She filed defamation claims, held a teary press conference, claimed Ethan was obsessed, unstable, delusional. But public sympathy had shifted. They had seen the evidence. They had seen the scars. And then came the subpoena. December 12th. Board review. Rachel walked in with 2 lawyers. Ethan walked in alone, holding only a leather-bound journal. He didn't need backup. He was the storm. One by one, he laid it all out. Slides, emails, transaction records, voice memos. Kelly had prepared a 200-page packet. Ethan only spoke for 15 minutes. It was enough. One board member, visibly shaken, asked, "Did you really plan this whole counterstrike? Silently?" Ethan replied, "No, I didn't plan it silently. I screamed every night. You just didn't listen." And then he left the room, leaving behind a stunned silence. Outside, journalists waited. He gave no statement, just one look. That night, Rachel's lawyers issued a statement denying all wrongdoing. But the seed of doubt had bloomed. Because when you plant betrayal, you harvest fury. And Ethan Walker, he was no longer building apps. He was rebuilding truth, and it had teeth. Karma doesn't knock. It breaks in. The wind outside screamed against the glass like it too wanted justice. Snow danced in violent spirals beyond the panoramic windows of the 47th floor. Ethan stood alone at the threshold, the door slowly swinging shut behind him, sealing him inside what could only be described as a surgical theater of power. Inside, the table was a battlefield. On one side, the board of Waveline. Lorraine Hayes presided like a quiet executioner. Rachel Blake sat at the opposite end, her eyes unreadable, every breath measured, every glance weaponized. Her legal team didn't move. They didn't need to. Their silence was her armor. Ethan walked forward, not with aggression, but with the calm of a man who had faced the abyss and memorized its pattern. He laid the journal gently on the table, then slipped the USB into the port. The lights dimmed. The first slide appeared, a heat map of code commits. Ethan's digital fingerprints etched deep into every core update of Waveline. His name burned in the backbone of the company. The second slide, a Slack thread. Rachel's cold command. Remove him, make it clean, no headlines until Q4. The third, an audio file. Her voice, precise and chilling. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't hiding. She was claiming. He was always the spark. But sparks fade. I am the flame that stays. Silence followed, heavy and stretching. No one moved. Until she did. A soft creak of a chair, then a voice. I leaked that recording, because I watched him give everything while she hollowed him out. Lily Monroe stepped forward, no longer the assistant, no longer background. Her presence was a hammer, her affidavit heavier than any document. She placed it on the table beside Ethan's journal. Her eyes met Rachel's. You buried his legacy in polished lies. Rachel rose, her heels clicking like gunshots across the floor. You think exposing me will bring you redemption? Ethan didn't have what it takes to lead. He never did. I did what had to be done. Ethan didn't respond with words. He advanced the slides, bank transfers, shell corporations, a Cayman account labeled Strategic Flow, $14 million, filtered, hidden, traced back to her, then the unexpected. A second file, new evidence, Nathan's memo, coded, buried in an internal folder, a shadow operation named Ghost Line, a backup company built off stolen architecture. Rachel had removed Ethan, but Nathan had removed her soul and replaced it with his own agenda. Rachel's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her foundation cracked, first in her posture, then in her gaze. Lorraine Hayes stood. This board hereby suspends Rachel Blake from all executive and strategic duties. Her actions will be referred to the authorities for full criminal review. Rachel didn't object. She turned to Ethan, eyes no longer sharp, but empty. Ethan said nothing. He didn't need to. His silence had evolved from pain into precision. Outside, the snow howled. Ethan walked toward the elevator. Lily joined him. In her hand, another USB. This is what Nathan was protecting. There's a third layer. International clients. Deep web encryption. Ethan, he didn't just want to ruin you. He needed your name erased so no one could trace it back. He looked at the USB, then at the world unfolding outside the glass. No more ghosts. Time to end the bloodline of betrayal. The elevator doors closed. As they descended, the glass walls behind them blurred in the snowstorm. But inside Ethan's chest, something had crystallized. Not revenge, not anger, clarity. For the first time, he saw the entire board, not of the company, but of the game they had played. Every piece moved, every trap laid, and now every hand exposed. Down below, the city waited. Not for a return, but for reckoning. Voiceover began as the screen faded to black. Some think karma waits in silence. But karma listens in every heartbeat, every betrayal whispered in boardrooms and buried in digital vaults. When the weight of silence becomes too loud to ignore, karma doesn't just knock, it floods. And as for Ethan Walker, he didn't just survive. He recalibrated the storm and rewrote the endgame. Chicago was quiet that night. Too quiet for a city so restless. But inside that stillness, something shifted. Not in the skyline, not in the streets, but in Ethan Walker. He sat alone at Millennium Park, where months ago he'd stared at the bean and seen a reflection he no longer recognized. Now, he stared again. But this time, he saw every scar, every betrayal, and every lesson, stitched into a new man who had survived, not despite the fire, but through it. The snow didn't fall anymore. It hovered, as if the world was holding its breath. Lily arrived beside him, a folder in hand. Not a report, not code. "You need to see this," she said. Inside the folder, a dossier, CIA letterhead, classified markings, a name circled, Marvin Rothschild, an investor, a backer of Nathan, a man whose reach went beyond tech, into arms, energy, black files, the real architect. Ethan read in silence, his jaw tightened, not in fear, but in clarity. "We were never just in a corporate war," Lily whispered. "We were pawns in a geopolitical game." His hands didn't shake. They moved deliberately. He lit a fire, fed the dossier into it, watched the paper curl. "Then let's stop playing." Back in the loft, Echopath launched a covert initiative, Project Obsidian, designed to trace Marvin's empire one keystroke at a time. Crowdsourced analysts, whistleblowers, former intelligence officers. The code was elegant, Ethan's masterpiece. But the world wasn't ready for what they uncovered. A leak, an encrypted video. Rachel, years ago, speaking not to Nathan but to Marvin, describing Ethan. "He's loyal, too loyal, but if he turns, he'll burn us all." The internet erupted. Marvin's shell companies collapsed in days. Interpol got involved. Senate hearings ignited. Ethan's name was never uttered, but every thread pointed back to his fingerprints. Yet Ethan never stepped forward, because it was never about being seen. It was about making them look. He disappeared after that. No social, no press. But his legend grew. Whispers in Silicon Valley, graffiti in Berlin, rewrite the game. A mural in Sao Paulo, his silhouette with the words, "Silence is a weapon." Then one final twist. A package arrived at Lily's door. No return address. Inside, a note. "You're the future now. I was just the spark." And a blueprint. New architecture for Echopath 2.0. Untraceable, open, free. As she read it, the skyline behind her flickered. Drones glided quietly past. The future had arrived. But not on billboards. In code. In choices. In Ethan. Because karma isn't just retribution. It's revelation. And Ethan Walker had become both. If this story left you breathless, if you've ever rebuilt from ruin, share this moment. Hit like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. What would you do if your betrayal became your beginning? Let justice echo. Let karma strike.